Question 1. Implementation of the Rasht Higher Education Institute's admission policy requires careful consideration of applicant qualifications. A candidate submits an application with a high school diploma that meets the minimum grade requirement, but one of the required subject-specific prerequisite courses is listed with a slightly different title than specified in the institute's guidelines. The admissions officer is aware that the content of the course is likely equivalent. What is the most appropriate course of action to uphold the integrity of the admission process and comply with regulatory frameworks? Option A. Forward the application to the admissions committee for a discretionary review, allowing them to make a judgment call based on the candidate's overall profile. Option B. Reject the application outright due to the discrepancy in the course title, adhering strictly to the literal wording of the admission requirements. Option C. Accept the application after verifying the equivalence of the course content through a brief internal review, documenting the rationale for accepting the alternative course title. Option D. Contact the candidate directly to request a formal reevaluation or reissuance of their transcript with the exact course title specified by the institute. Correct answer is C. Accept the application after verifying the equivalence of the course content through a brief internal review, documenting the rationale for accepting the alternative course title. Explanation. The scenario presents a challenge in balancing the institute's academic integrity with the practicalities of admitting students who may have varying levels of preparedness, a common issue in higher education admissions. The core professional challenge lies in adhering strictly to the Rasht Higher Education Institute's established admission criteria and the relevant national educational regulations, while ensuring a fair and transparent selection process. Misinterpreting or circumventing these regulations can lead to legal challenges, reputational damage, and a compromised student body. The correct approach involves a thorough review of all submitted documents against the defined academic prerequisites and admission guidelines as stipulated by the Rasht Higher Education Institute's internal policies and any overarching national educational directives. This ensures that all candidates are evaluated on the same objective standards, upholding the principle of meritocracy and regulatory compliance. The justification for this approach is rooted in the Institute's commitment to academic standards and the legal framework governing higher education admissions in its jurisdiction, which mandates fair and equitable treatment of all applicants. An incorrect approach would be to overlook minor discrepancies in documentation or academic records to accommodate a candidate who might otherwise be borderline. This is ethically problematic as it deviates from established criteria and can be perceived as favoritism, undermining the fairness of the admission process. It also risks violating the institute's own admission regulations and potentially national educational laws that emphasize standardized evaluation. Another incorrect approach would be to prioritize the subjective impression of a candidate's potential over their documented qualifications and adherence to formal requirements. While assessing potential is part of admissions, it cannot supersede the explicit, objective criteria set forth by the institute and its governing bodies. This approach is vulnerable to bias and lacks the transparency required by regulatory frameworks. A further incorrect approach would be to seek external influence or pressure to admit a candidate who does not meet the established criteria. This directly contravenes principles of institutional autonomy and fair competition, and it is likely to be in violation of regulations designed to prevent undue influence in academic admissions. Professionals in admissions should employ a decision-making process that begins with a clear understanding of all applicable regulations and institutional policies. They must then objectively assess each application against these defined criteria. When faced with ambiguity or borderline cases, the process should involve consultation with senior colleagues or designated committees, rather than unilateral decisions that deviate from established procedures. Transparency, fairness, and adherence to documented standards are paramount. Question 2. Risk assessment procedures indicate that the Rasht Higher Education Institute's current admissions committee is heavily reliant on historical admission data and subjective qualitative assessments to evaluate candidates for its undergraduate programs. This approach has led to concerns about potential biases and inequitable outcomes. Which of the following approaches best addresses these concerns while adhering to the principles of fair and merit-based admissions? Option A. Conduct a comprehensive review of all admissions criteria to identify and mitigate any potential biases, and implement objective, standardized assessment methods that focus on academic potential and suitability. Option B, continue to use historical admission data as the primary basis for evaluation, assuming it reflects past successful student profiles. Option C, prioritize applicants with the highest scores in easily quantifiable metrics, such as standardized test results, without further consideration of other factors. Option D, increase the weight given to subjective qualitative assessments by committee members to capture a more nuanced understanding of each applicant. Correct answer is A. Conduct a comprehensive review of all admissions criteria to identify and mitigate any potential biases, and implement objective, standardized assessment methods that focus on academic potential and suitability. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because the Institute's admissions committee is tasked with evaluating candidates based on criteria that may inadvertently lead to discriminatory outcomes, even if unintentional. The challenge lies in balancing the Institute's academic standards with the imperative to ensure fair and equitable access to higher education, as mandated by the principles of fairness and non-discrimination inherent in educational regulations. Careful judgment is required to identify and mitigate potential biases within the assessment process. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the admissions criteria to identify any elements that could disproportionately disadvantage certain groups of applicants, followed by the implementation of objective, merit-based evaluation methods that are demonstrably fair and transparent. This aligns with the overarching goal of educational institutions to provide opportunities based on academic potential and suitability, rather than factors that could be construed as discriminatory. The regulatory framework for higher education entrance exams, while not explicitly detailed here, universally emphasizes fairness, equal opportunity, and the avoidance of bias in admissions processes. This approach upholds these fundamental principles by proactively seeking to eliminate potential barriers. An incorrect approach that relies solely on historical admission data, without critically examining the underlying factors that shape that data, risks perpetuating existing inequalities. If past admissions data reflects systemic biases, using it as the sole basis for future decisions will embed those biases. This fails to meet the ethical obligation to provide equal opportunity and may contravene implicit or explicit regulatory requirements for fair admissions. Another incorrect approach that focuses on subjective qualitative assessments without clear, standardized rubrics can introduce personal biases of the evaluators. This lack of objectivity makes the process vulnerable to arbitrary decisions and can lead to unfair treatment of applicants, violating the principle of meritocratic evaluation and potentially contravening guidelines that demand transparent and consistent assessment. A further incorrect approach that prioritizes easily quantifiable metrics without considering the broader context of an applicant's background or potential overlooks the multifaceted nature of academic aptitude. This can disadvantage candidates from less resourced backgrounds who may excel in other areas or demonstrate significant potential despite lower scores in specific quantifiable measures, thereby failing to promote equitable access. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a systematic review of all assessment components, seeking to identify potential sources of bias. This includes consulting with diverse stakeholders, seeking expert advice on best practices in admissions, and regularly evaluating the effectiveness and fairness of the chosen assessment methods. The ultimate goal is to create an admissions process that is both rigorous in identifying suitable candidates and equitable in providing opportunities to all qualified applicants. Question 3. During the evaluation of an applicant's performance on the Ahrar, Rasht Higher Education Institute entrance examination, it is observed that the applicant was found to be discreetly looking at the answer sheet of another candidate. According to the regulatory framework, laws, and guidelines of the Ahrar, Rasht Higher Education Institute entrance exam, what is the most appropriate course of action for the examination proctor? Option A. Ignore the incident to avoid disrupting the examination environment and focus on other candidates. Option B. Immediately disqualify the applicant from the examination and report the incident to the examination committee for further review. Option C. Ask the applicant to explain their actions and then allow them to continue if they claim it was accidental. Option D. Issue a verbal warning to the applicant and allow them to continue the examination, noting the incident for future reference. The correct answer is B. Immediately disqualify the applicant from the examination and report the incident to the examination committee for further review. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires the applicant to navigate the ethical considerations of academic integrity and the proper use of information within the context of a higher education entrance examination. The applicant must demonstrate an understanding of what constitutes acceptable assistance versus academic dishonesty. The core of the challenge lies in distinguishing between legitimate support and actions that undermine the fairness and validity of the examination process. The correct approach involves the applicant recognizing that seeking or receiving unauthorized assistance during an examination is a violation of academic integrity rules. This approach aligns with the principles of fairness, honesty, and meritocracy that are fundamental to any educational institution, including Ahrar Rasht Higher Education Institute. Specifically, the examination regulations of Ahrar Rasht Higher Education Institute, as outlined in its admission guidelines, strictly prohibit any form of cheating or unauthorized collaboration. Adhering to these regulations ensures that the assessment accurately reflects the applicant's own knowledge and abilities, thereby maintaining the credibility of the entrance examination and the institute itself. An incorrect approach would be to attempt to obtain answers from another applicant. This directly contravenes the examination rules by engaging in unauthorized collaboration and seeking to gain an unfair advantage. Such an action undermines the principle of individual assessment and is a clear breach of academic integrity, which could lead to disqualification from the examination and potential disciplinary action by the institute. Another incorrect approach would be to use unauthorized reference materials, such as notes or textbooks, during the examination. This also constitutes cheating, as it involves accessing information not permitted by the examination proctors. The regulations of Ahrar Rasht Higher Education Institute clearly stipulate that only approved materials, if any, are allowed. The use of unauthorized materials bypasses the intended assessment of the applicant's recall and understanding, thereby compromising the examination's validity. A further incorrect approach would be to claim ignorance of the rules regarding examination conduct. While an applicant might genuinely be unaware of specific details, the general expectation in any formal examination setting is to adhere to principles of honesty and fairness. Relying on ignorance as an excuse for prohibited behavior is not a valid defense and does not absolve the applicant of responsibility for their actions. The institute's admission process, implicitly, requires applicants to familiarize themselves with the examination's procedural guidelines. A professional decision-making process for similar situations involves a clear understanding of the institution's academic integrity policies and examination regulations. Applicants should always err on the side of caution and seek clarification if unsure about any rule. The paramount principle is to ensure that one's actions are honest, fair, and in full compliance with the established guidelines. If faced with a situation where assistance might be perceived as unauthorized, the professional course of action is to refrain from such assistance and, if necessary, report the situation to the examination invigilator. Question 4. Stakeholder feedback indicates that the current admissions process for the Ahrar Rasht Higher Education Institute may inadvertently disadvantage applicants from certain socioeconomic backgrounds, potentially limiting diversity. The institute's leadership is considering how to respond to this feedback while upholding academic standards. Which of the following represents the most appropriate course of action? Option A. Immediately revise the admissions criteria to include a quota system for applicants from disadvantaged backgrounds to ensure greater representation. Option B. Conduct a comprehensive review of the admissions criteria and selection methodologies, analyzing admissions data to identify any systemic biases, and exploring potential adjustments that enhance fairness without compromising academic rigor. Option C. Issue a public statement acknowledging the feedback, but asserting that the current admissions process is already fair and objective, and no changes are necessary. Option D. Introduce a supplementary interview round for all applicants, with the interview panel given discretion to adjust scores based on perceived potential rather than solely on academic metrics. The correct answer is B. Conduct a comprehensive review of the admissions criteria and selection methodologies, analyzing admissions data to identify any systemic biases, and exploring potential adjustments that enhance fairness without compromising academic rigor. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the need to balance the institute's commitment to academic integrity with the practicalities of managing student admissions and the potential impact of external pressures. The institute must navigate the ethical imperative of fair and objective evaluation against the desire to accommodate a diverse applicant pool and maintain positive relationships with stakeholders. Careful judgment is required to ensure that any adjustments to the admissions process are transparent, equitable, and do not compromise the quality of education or the institute's reputation. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the existing admissions criteria and processes, followed by a data-driven assessment of the feedback's validity and potential impact. This approach prioritizes evidence-based decision-making and adherence to established academic standards. Specifically, it aligns with the Rasht Higher Education Institute's regulatory framework, which emphasizes merit-based admissions and the maintenance of academic rigor. By seeking to understand the root causes of the feedback and exploring potential improvements that uphold these principles, the Institute demonstrates a commitment to continuous quality enhancement and ethical governance. An incorrect approach would be to immediately implement changes based solely on the stakeholder feedback without a proper investigation. This could lead to a dilution of academic standards, unfair advantages for certain applicants, and a perception of bias, thereby violating the Institute's commitment to meritocracy and potentially contravening internal policies on admissions. Another incorrect approach would be to dismiss the feedback entirely without consideration. This demonstrates a lack of responsiveness to stakeholder concerns and could damage the Institute's reputation and relationships, failing to uphold the principle of stakeholder engagement that is often implicitly or explicitly part of institutional governance. A third incorrect approach would be to implement superficial changes that do not address the core issues raised by the feedback, leading to a continued perception of inadequacy and a failure to genuinely improve the admissions process. Professionals should approach such situations by first acknowledging and documenting the feedback. Then, they should initiate a structured review process, gathering relevant data and consulting with relevant internal committees or departments. The decision-making process should be guided by the Institute's mission, values, and governing regulations, ensuring that any proposed actions are justifiable, transparent, and aligned with the long-term academic objectives of Rasht Higher Education Institute. Question 5. Performance analysis shows a pattern of students seeking clarification on assignment requirement very close to submission deadlines, with one recent case involving a student submitting work that appears to closely mirror a peer's previous submission, raising concerns about potential academic misconduct. The Institute's academic integrity policy clearly defines plagiarism and unauthorized collaboration. How should the Institute's Academic Affairs Department proceed? Option A. Immediately approve the student's submission, assuming the student was seeking legitimate clarification and to avoid unnecessary student conflict. Option B. Advise the student to resubmit the assignment with a warning about academic integrity without conducting a formal review. Option C. Automatically assume academic misconduct and impose a penalty on the student due to the proximity of the submission to a peer's work and the timing of the clarification request. Option D. Initiate a formal academic integrity review process to assess the student's submission against the Institute's policies on plagiarism and unauthorized collaboration. Correct answer is D. Initiate a formal academic integrity review process to assess the student's submission against the Institute's policies on plagiarism and unauthorized collaboration. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the need to balance the Institute's academic integrity with the practicalities of student support and the potential for misinterpretation of academic policies. The core difficulty lies in ensuring that while providing assistance, the Institute does not inadvertently facilitate academic dishonesty or create an unfair advantage for certain students. Careful judgment is required to distinguish between legitimate support and prohibited assistance. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the student's submission against the Institute's established academic integrity policies, specifically focusing on the definition of plagiarism and unauthorized collaboration. This approach is professionally sound because it adheres strictly to the Rasht Higher Education Institute's regulatory framework for academic conduct. By initiating a formal review process, the Institute upholds its commitment to academic honesty, ensuring that all students are evaluated on their own merit and that the integrity of the degrees awarded is maintained. This aligns with the ethical obligation to provide a fair and equitable learning environment. An incorrect approach of immediately approving the submission without further investigation would be a significant ethical and regulatory failure. It would undermine the institute's policies on academic integrity and could lead to the acceptance of plagiarized or improperly collaborated work, thereby devaluing the academic achievements of all students. Another incorrect approach of automatically assuming misconduct and penalizing the student without a proper review process is also a regulatory failure. It violates the principles of due process and fairness, potentially harming a student who may have unintentionally crossed a boundary or who is genuinely seeking clarification. Such an action would be contrary to the institute's commitment to supporting student learning and development. Professionals in this situation should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes adherence to established policies and procedures. This involves 1. Understanding the specific regulations governing academic integrity at Ahrar Rasht Higher Education Institute. 2. Gathering all relevant information about the student's submission and the circumstances. 3. Conducting a fair and impartial review process as outlined by the institute. And 4. Communicating the findings and any subsequent actions clearly and transparently to the student, while also ensuring appropriate documentation. Question 6. The monitoring system demonstrates a significant increase in flagged activities during the Ahrar Rasht Higher Education Institute entrance exam, including unusual cursor movements, prolonged periods of inactivity followed by rapid typing, and instances of applicants looking away from the screen for extended durations. Which of the following represents the most appropriate immediate response for the examination proctors? Option A. Ignore the flagged activities, assuming they are due to technical glitches or applicant nervousness, and focus on other aspects of proctoring. Option B. Immediately flag all applicants associated with these activities for disqualification due to suspected cheating. Option C. Initiate a detailed review of the flagged activities, cross-referencing them with applicant profiles and known testing protocols to identify genuine instances of academic dishonesty before taking any action. Option D. Temporarily halt the examination for all applicants until the system's sensitivity settings can be recalibrated. The correct answer is C. Initiate a detailed review of the flagged activities, cross-referencing them with applicant profiles and known testing protocols to identify genuine instances of academic dishonesty before taking any action. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the need for academic integrity with the practicalities of implementing and maintaining a robust monitoring system for an entrance examination. The challenge lies in identifying potential vulnerabilities in the system that could be exploited, while also ensuring that the monitoring methods themselves do not infringe upon the rights or create undue stress for the applicants. Careful judgment is required to distinguish between genuine security risks and minor technical glitches or user errors. The correct approach involves a proactive and systematic review of the monitoring system's logs and alerts to identify patterns indicative of academic dishonesty. This approach is right because it directly addresses the core objective of the monitoring system: to uphold the integrity of the Ahrar Rasht Higher Education Institute entrance exam. By focusing on anomalies and suspicious activities, it allows for targeted investigation and intervention, aligning with the institute's commitment to fair and equitable admissions. This aligns with the implicit regulatory expectation for educational institutions to maintain the credibility of their examinations. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the volume of alerts without contextual analysis is professionally unacceptable. This failure stems from a lack of critical evaluation, treating all alerts as equally significant without considering the possibility of false positives or benign user behavior. This can lead to wasted resources and potentially unfair accusations against applicants. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes immediate system shutdown upon any alert, regardless of its severity or context, is also professionally flawed. This demonstrates an overreaction that could disrupt the examination process unnecessarily and create a hostile testing environment. It fails to apply a reasoned, graduated response based on the nature of the detected anomaly, which is a fundamental aspect of effective risk management. A further incorrect approach that involves ignoring alerts due to perceived system limitations or resource constraints is ethically and regulatorily unsound. This abdication of responsibility undermines the entire purpose of the monitoring system and compromises the integrity of the entrance exam. It suggests a disregard for the institute's commitment to fair assessment. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. First, understand the objectives of the monitoring system and the specific regulations governing the examination. Second, analyze the data generated by the system, looking for patterns and anomalies that suggest a breach of academic integrity. Third, develop a protocol for responding to different types of alerts, ranging from minor inquiries to more serious investigations. Fourth, ensure that any actions taken are proportionate, fair, and in accordance with established procedures. Finally, regularly review and update the monitoring system and its protocols to adapt to evolving threats and technologies. Question 7. Stakeholder feedback indicates that while the Rasht Higher Education Institute aims for a diverse student body, certain demographic groups perceive significant barriers to entry, leading to underrepresentation. The institute is exploring strategies to address this feedback while strictly adhering to its admission regulations. Which of the following approaches best balances the institute's goals with its regulatory obligations? Option A. Implementing targeted academic support and information dissemination programs designed to help all prospective students, particularly those from underrepresented backgrounds, better understand and meet the institute's admission requirements. Option B. Waiving specific prerequisite courses or standardized test score requirements for applicants belonging to certain demographic categories to increase their chances of admission. Option C. Focusing marketing efforts exclusively on demographic groups that are currently underrepresented, without providing additional academic or informational support. Option D. Offering conditional admission to candidates from identified underrepresented groups who may not fully meet the standard academic entry criteria, with the expectation that they will improve their academic standing during their first year. The correct answer is A. Implementing targeted academic support and information dissemination programs designed to help all prospective students, particularly those from underrepresented backgrounds, better understand and meet the institute's admission requirements. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between the institute's desire to attract a diverse student body and the need to maintain academic integrity and adhere to admission regulations. The institute must balance inclusivity with fairness and compliance. Careful judgment is required to ensure that any outreach or support mechanisms do not inadvertently create an unfair advantage or violate the spirit and letter of the Rasht Higher Education Institute's admission policies. The correct approach involves developing targeted support programs that address identified barriers to entry for specific demographic groups without altering the core admission criteria, or offering preferential treatment that bypasses the established evaluation process. This aligns with the ethical principle of fairness and the regulatory framework of the Rasht Higher Education Institute, which mandates a merit-based and transparent admission process. Providing resources like academic preparation workshops or information sessions that clarify the application process and academic expectations for all prospective students, regardless of background, is permissible and promotes equal opportunity. An incorrect approach that involves offering conditional admission based on demographic factors, rather than academic merit, directly violates the principle of meritocracy and the institute's admission regulations. This creates an unfair system and undermines the credibility of the admissions process. Another incorrect approach, such as waiving certain academic requirements for specific groups, circumvents the established evaluation standards and is a clear breach of regulatory compliance. Finally, an approach that focuses solely on marketing to certain demographics without providing substantive support or ensuring equitable access to information fails to address the root causes of underrepresentation and can be perceived as tokenistic, potentially leading to further stakeholder dissatisfaction. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes understanding the specific regulatory requirements of the Rasht Higher Education Institute, identifying the root causes of stakeholder concerns, and developing solutions that are both ethically sound and compliant. This involves consulting relevant admission policies, seeking clarification from academic leadership, and designing interventions that enhance access and support without compromising the integrity of the admission process. Question 8. System analysis indicates that the Ahrar Rasht Higher Education Institute is experiencing a critical shortage of qualified faculty in several key departments, leading to concerns about maintaining academic standards and fulfilling course offerings for the upcoming semester. The head of administration is urging the recruitment committee to expedite the hiring process, suggesting that certain candidates with strong informal recommendations and apparent practical experience, though lacking complete formal documentation, be prioritized for immediate appointment to mitigate the immediate staffing crisis. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the regulatory framework and ethical guidelines for faculty recruitment at the Ahrar Rasht Higher Education Institute? Option A. Conduct a thorough and objective evaluation of all candidates against predefined criteria, ensuring all required documentation is submitted and verified, even if it means a slight delay in filling some positions. Option B. Select candidates based on their perceived ability to quickly integrate and contribute to departmental operations, overlooking minor discrepancies in their academic qualifications or experience as long as they demonstrate enthusiasm. Option C. Delegate the final hiring decisions to department heads who are most familiar with the immediate needs, allowing them to bypass the Central Recruitment Committee's formal review process for urgent hires. Option D. Prioritize candidates with strong informal recommendations and apparent practical experience, accepting incomplete application packages to expedite the hiring process and address the immediate staffing needs. The correct answer is A. Conduct a thorough and objective evaluation of all candidates against predefined criteria, ensuring all required documentation is submitted and verified, even if it means a slight delay in filling some positions. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between the Institute's immediate need for qualified faculty and the rigorous, merit-based selection process mandated by the Ahrar Rasht Higher Education Institute's regulatory framework. The pressure to fill positions quickly can tempt individuals to bypass established procedures, risking the integrity of the hiring process and potentially compromising the quality of education. Careful judgment is required to balance operational needs with adherence to established academic and administrative standards. The correct approach involves a thorough and objective evaluation of all candidates against the predefined criteria outlined in the Ahrar Rasht Higher Education Institute's recruitment guidelines. This includes verifying academic credentials, assessing teaching experience, and conducting interviews that probe for pedagogical skills and subject matter expertise. This approach is ethically sound and legally compliant because it upholds the principles of fairness, transparency, and meritocracy, which are fundamental to academic institutions. Adhering to these established procedures ensures that only the most qualified individuals are appointed, thereby safeguarding the Institute's reputation and the quality of its academic programs, as stipulated by the Institute's charter and relevant higher education regulations. An incorrect approach would be to prioritize candidates based on personal connections or perceived immediate utility without a formal assessment. This bypasses the established selection criteria and violates the principle of equal opportunity for all applicants. Such an action would be a direct contravention of the Ahrar Rasht Higher Education Institute's commitment to fair hiring practices and could lead to accusations of favoritism or nepotism, undermining the credibility of the institute. Another incorrect approach would be to expedite the review process by accepting incomplete application packages or waiving essential documentation. This compromises the integrity of the evaluation by preventing a comprehensive assessment of each candidate's qualifications. It deviates from the documented procedures designed to ensure a thorough and fair selection, potentially leading to the appointment of less qualified individuals and exposing the institute to regulatory scrutiny for non-compliance with its own established protocols. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should begin with a clear understanding of the relevant regulatory framework and internal policies governing recruitment. When faced with pressure to deviate, professionals must first reaffirm the importance of these guidelines. They should then communicate the potential risks and consequences of noncompliance to stakeholders, emphasizing the long-term benefits of a robust and fair selection process. If operational pressures are significant, the professional should explore legitimate avenues for streamlining the existing process without compromising its core principles, such as improving internal coordination or allocating additional resources to the hiring committee, rather than resorting to shortcuts that violate established regulations. Question 9. Stakeholder feedback indicates that prospective students and their families perceive the Ahrar Rasht Higher Education Institute's admission process as lacking clarity and consistency. The institute's administration is considering how to respond to this feedback to enhance the fairness and transparency of admissions while upholding academic standards. Which of the following approaches best addresses this situation within the regulatory framework of Iranian higher education admissions? Option A. Conduct a comprehensive review of current admission criteria and procedures, identify areas for improvement in transparency and consistency, and develop revised, clearly communicated guidelines for future admission cycles, ensuring alignment with national educational policies. Option B. Increase the overall intake capacity of the institute without altering the existing admission criteria or the process for evaluating applicants. Option C. Disregard the feedback, as the current admission process has been in place for several years and is considered sufficient by the faculty. Option D. Immediately implement a policy to accept a higher percentage of applicants from specific regions or with certain affiliations, based on informal suggestions from influential community members to improve perceived accessibility. The correct answer is A. Conduct a comprehensive review of current admission criteria and procedures, identify areas for improvement in transparency and consistency, and develop revised, clearly communicated guidelines for future admission cycles, ensuring alignment with national educational policies. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the need to balance the institute's commitment to academic integrity with the practicalities of managing student admissions and the potential for external pressures. The institute must navigate the delicate balance of upholding its admission standards while responding to feedback that suggests a need for improvement in the fairness and transparency of its processes. Careful judgment is required to ensure that any changes made are both effective and compliant with the Ahrar Rasht Higher Education Institute's internal regulations and any overarching national educational guidelines. The correct approach involves a systematic review of the existing admission criteria and procedures, followed by the development of revised guidelines that are clearly communicated to all stakeholders. This approach is right because it directly addresses the stakeholder feedback by initiating a process of improvement grounded in evidence and best practices. It aligns with the ethical imperative of fairness and transparency in educational admission, ensuring that all prospective students are evaluated on objective and consistent grounds. This methodical process also allows for the incorporation of any relevant national educational policies or directives that govern higher education admissions in Iran, thereby ensuring regulatory compliance. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on increasing the number of admitted students without a corresponding review of criteria would fail to address the core of the feedback, which implies issues with the fairness of the process, not necessarily its restrictiveness. This would be an ethical failure, as it prioritizes quantity over quality and fairness, potentially undermining the academic reputation of the institute. Another incorrect approach that involves making arbitrary changes to admission scores based on informal requests would be a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This would violate principles of equal opportunity and could lead to accusations of favoritism or corruption, directly contravening the institute's commitment to merit-based admissions and potentially national regulations on educational equity. A third incorrect approach that ignores the feedback entirely would be a failure to engage with the institute's community and a dereliction of professional responsibility to continuously improve its operations. This could lead to a decline in student satisfaction and a perception of institutional stagnation. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a thorough understanding of the feedback received, identifying the specific concerns raised. This should be followed by an assessment of the current admission policies and procedures against established internal standards and any applicable national educational laws or guidelines. The next step involves exploring potential solutions that are both effective in addressing the feedback and compliant with regulations. This often includes consultation with relevant departments and stakeholders. Finally, the chosen solution should be implemented with clear communication and a mechanism for ongoing evaluation to ensure its continued effectiveness and compliance. Question 10. Stakeholder feedback indicates a growing concern among faculty regarding the potential for academic dishonesty in submitted assignments, particularly in the context of online learning. A faculty member has reported a student's submitted essay for suspected plagiarism, citing similarities to publicly available online sources. The Rasht Higher Education Institute's internal regulations stipulate a formal process for addressing academic misconduct, including student rights to appeal. Which of the following represents the most appropriate initial response by the institute's academic administration? Option A. Initiate a formal investigation into the alleged plagiarism, following the institute's established academic integrity policy and student grievance procedures, which includes notifying the student and providing an opportunity for them to respond. Option B. Dismiss the faculty member's concerns as a routine issue and instruct them to proceed with grading the assignment as submitted. Option C. Advise the faculty member to discuss the matter directly with the student to resolve it informally. Option D. Immediately fail the student for the assignment and inform the faculty member that their concerns have been addressed. The correct answer is A. Initiate a formal investigation into the alleged plagiarism, following the institute's established academic integrity policy and student grievance procedures, which includes notifying the student and providing an opportunity for them to respond. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the institute's commitment to academic integrity with the need to address legitimate concerns raised by stakeholders, specifically students and faculty. The challenge lies in interpreting and applying the Rasht Higher Education Institute's internal regulations regarding academic misconduct and the appeals process in a fair and transparent manner, while also considering the potential impact on student morale and faculty workload. Careful judgment is required to distinguish between genuine academic errors and deliberate attempts at plagiarism or cheating, and to ensure that the investigation and resolution process adheres to established procedures. The correct approach involves a thorough, impartial investigation of the alleged plagiarism, adhering strictly to the Rasht Higher Education Institute's established academic integrity policy and student grievance procedures. This policy likely outlines the steps for reporting, investigating, and adjudicating cases of academic misconduct, including provisions for student appeals. By initiating a formal review process that allows for the presentation of evidence by both parties and a decision based on the institute's regulations, the institute upholds its commitment to academic honesty and provides a fair process for the accused student. This approach is ethically sound and legally defensible within the institute's own framework, ensuring due process and adherence to its internal governance. An incorrect approach would be to immediately dismiss the student's work based solely on the initial suspicion without a formal investigation. This fails to provide the student with due process and violates the principles of fairness and natural justice embedded in most institutional regulations. Another incorrect approach would be to ignore the faculty member's concerns and accept the student's work without any review, which would undermine the institute's academic standards and the faculty's professional judgment. Furthermore, attempting to resolve the issue informally without following the documented procedures for academic misconduct would create a precedent for inconsistent application of rules and could lead to future disputes and challenges to the institute's authority. Professionals in such situations should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes adherence to established policies and procedures. This involves 1. Understanding the relevant internal regulations and guidelines thoroughly. 2. Gathering all relevant information and evidence impartially. 3. Following the prescribed steps for investigation and adjudication. 4. Ensuring transparency and fairness throughout the process. 5. Documenting all actions and decisions. 6. Seeking guidance from relevant internal departments, e.g., academic affairs, legal counsel if applicable, when faced with ambiguity. Question 11. Investigation of the process for admitting new faculty members at Rasht Higher Education Institute reveals a situation where several critical positions are vacant, and there is significant pressure from department heads to fill these roles immediately with candidates who have strong industry connections, but may not fully meet all the formal academic prerequisites outlined in the Institute's admission guidelines. The Institute's regulations clearly state the minimum qualifications required for faculty appointments, including specific degree levels and teaching experience. Which of the following approaches best navigates this implementation challenge? while adhering to the regulatory framework and ethical standards of Ahrar Rasht Higher Education Institute. Option A. Implement a dual admission track, one for candidates with strong industry connections that emphasizes practical experience, and another for candidates with traditional academic backgrounds, allowing for different sets of admission criteria for each track. Option B. Conduct a thorough and objective evaluation of all candidates against the established academic and professional qualifications, as per the Institute's regulations, ensuring that any exceptions or waivers are processed strictly according to the defined procedures, and only when fully justified by exceptional circumstances and documented evidence. Option C. Expedite the review of candidates with strong industry connections, focusing on their practical experience as a primary qualification, and seek a waiver for minor discrepancies in formal academic prerequisites from the relevant academic committee. Option D. Prioritize candidates recommended by senior faculty or external stakeholders, allowing them to assume teaching duties on a provisional basis while their formal admission applications are processed, with the understanding that the full admission requirements will be addressed later. Correct answer is C. Expedite the review of candidates with strong industry connections, focusing on their practical experience as a primary qualification, and seek a waiver for minor discrepancies in formal academic prerequisites from the relevant academic committee. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between the Institute's immediate need for qualified faculty and the rigorous, established admission standards designed to ensure academic integrity and the quality of education. The pressure to fill positions quickly can lead to compromises that undermine the long-term reputation and effectiveness of Ahrar Rasht Higher Education Institute. Careful judgment is required to balance operational needs with adherence to regulatory frameworks and ethical principles governing higher education admissions. The correct approach involves a thorough and objective evaluation of all candidates against the established criteria, prioritizing the integrity of the admission process. This means ensuring that any candidate, regardless of their connections or the urgency of the need, must meet the defined academic and professional qualifications as stipulated by the Institute's regulations and any overarching higher education guidelines applicable in Iran. This upholds the principle of meritocracy and ensures that only qualified individuals are appointed, thereby safeguarding the quality of teaching and research. An incorrect approach would be to bypass or, significantly, relax the established admission criteria for certain candidates, even if they are perceived as highly capable or have strong recommendations. This action directly violates the regulatory framework governing admissions by creating an uneven playing field and potentially admitting individuals who do not meet the minimum standards. Ethically, it undermines fairness and transparency, fostering an environment where favoritism can override merit. Another incorrect approach is to delay the formal admission process indefinitely while relying on informal arrangements. This circumvents the established procedures and regulatory oversight, creating a situation where individuals are functioning in academic roles without proper vetting. This practice is not only procedurally unsound, but also ethically questionable, as it lacks transparency and accountability, potentially exposing the Institute to risks associated with unqualified personnel. A third incorrect approach involves selectively applying the admission criteria, applying stricter standards to some candidates while being lenient with others based on external pressures or personal biases. This is a clear breach of ethical conduct and regulatory compliance, as it violates the principle of equal treatment and fairness. Such selective application erodes trust in the institution's processes and can lead to legal challenges and reputational damage. A professional decision-making process in such situations should involve a clear understanding of the institute's internal regulations and any relevant national higher education policies. When faced with conflicting pressures, professionals should first consult these governing documents. If ambiguity exists, or if the pressure to deviate is significant, seeking guidance from the relevant administrative bodies or legal counsel within the institute is crucial. The ultimate decision must prioritize adherence to established standards and ethical principles, even if it means a temporary delay in filling a position. This ensures long-term institutional integrity and compliance. Question 12. The efficiency study reveals a significant discrepancy in student enrollment data between the admissions department and the academic records office at Ahrar Rasht Higher Education Institute. The admissions department's figures are consistently higher, suggesting potential issues with how newly admitted students are being transferred to active academic records. Which of the following is the most appropriate initial step to address this discrepancy? Option A. Report the discrepancy to the Ministry of Higher Education as a potential data integrity breach, requesting an external audit. Option B. Immediately update the Academic Records Office's database to match the admissions department's figures, assuming the admissions data is more current. Option C. Instruct the Academic Records Office to investigate the admissions department's process for potential data entry errors without direct collaboration. Option D. Conduct a detailed, side-by-side comparison of the enrollment lists from both the admissions department and the Academic Records Office, identifying specific students whose records are not aligned, and then convene a joint meeting with representatives from both departments to reconcile the differences. The correct answer is D. Conduct a detailed, side-by-side comparison of the enrollment lists from both the admissions department and the Academic Records Office, identifying specific students whose records are not aligned, and then convene a joint meeting with representatives from both departments to reconcile the differences. Explanation. The efficiency study reveals a significant discrepancy in student enrollment data between the admissions department and the Academic Records Office at Ahrar Rasht Higher Education Institute. This scenario is professionally challenging because it involves potential data integrity issues that could impact institutional planning, resource allocation, and student services. It requires careful judgment to identify the root cause and implement corrective actions without compromising accuracy or creating further discrepancies. The correct approach involves a systematic cross-referencing of enrollment records from both departments, identifying specific points of divergence, and then initiating a joint reconciliation process. This approach is professionally sound as it adheres to principles of data accuracy and accountability, which are implicitly expected in the operational guidelines of any higher education institution. By directly addressing the data mismatch through a collaborative and verifiable process, it ensures that official records reflect the true enrollment status, thereby upholding the integrity of the institute's operations and reporting. An incorrect approach of solely relying on the admissions department's data fails to acknowledge the potential for errors or omissions in any single source, and bypasses the crucial validation step provided by the Academic Records Office. This could lead to inaccurate reporting and flawed decision-making. Another incorrect approach of immediately escalating the issue to external auditors without an internal investigation is premature and inefficient. It bypasses the Institute's internal capacity to resolve operational discrepancies and can create unnecessary alarm and administrative burden. A third incorrect approach of assuming a clerical error and making unilateral adjustments to the Academic Records Office's data without verification is unethical and unprofessional. It undermines the authority and accuracy of the Academic Records Office and could lead to further data corruption. Professionals should approach such situations by first gathering all relevant information, then performing a thorough internal analysis to pinpoint the source of the discrepancy. Collaboration between departments is key to resolving data inconsistencies. If internal resolution proves difficult or suggests systemic issues, then escalation to higher administrative levels or relevant oversight bodies within the institute would be the next appropriate step, rather than immediate external intervention or unilateral action. Question 13. Stakeholder feedback indicates a desire to increase enrollment diversity at the Ahrar Rasht Higher Education Institute by admitting a broader range of academic backgrounds. However, the current admission criteria, as defined by the Institute's regulatory framework, are strictly based on specific prerequisite subject scores. What is the most appropriate course of action to address this feedback while maintaining regulatory compliance? Option A. Focus recruitment efforts on regions or schools that historically produce students with the exact prerequisite subject scores, thereby indirectly increasing diversity within the existing framework. Option B. Inform stakeholders that the current admission criteria are fixed and cannot be altered to accommodate the request for increased diversity. Option C. Advise admissions officers to subjectively interpret the existing prerequisite subject scores to allow for a wider range of applicants. Option D. Propose a formal amendment to the admission regulations to include alternative pathways or weighted criteria that acknowledge diverse academic backgrounds, subject to approval by the relevant governing bodies. The correct answer is D. Propose a formal amendment to the admission regulations to include alternative pathways or weighted criteria that acknowledge diverse academic backgrounds, subject to approval by the relevant governing bodies. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between the institute's desire to attract a diverse student body and the need to adhere strictly to the admission criteria defined by the Ahrar Rasht Higher Education Institute's regulatory framework. The pressure to meet enrollment targets can lead to a temptation to bend or reinterpret established rules, which can have significant ethical and regulatory repercussions. Careful judgment is required to balance institutional goals with the integrity of the admission process. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the existing admission regulations and a transparent communication of any proposed changes to the relevant governing bodies and stakeholders. This ensures that any adjustments are made in accordance with the Institute's established legal and ethical standards. Specifically, the regulatory framework for the Ahrar Rasht Higher Education Institute mandates a clear and objective set of admission criteria. Any deviation or reinterpretation without formal amendment and approval would violate these regulations. Furthermore, ethical considerations demand fairness and equal opportunity for all applicants, which is best served by consistent application of established rules. An incorrect approach would be to unilaterally alter the interpretation of existing criteria to accommodate specific candidates. This undermines the fairness of the admission process and violates the principle of equal treatment for all applicants, which is a cornerstone of ethical academic admissions. Such an action would also likely contravene the spirit, if not the letter, of the Ahrar Rasht Higher Education Institute's admission policies, potentially leading to accusations of bias or favoritism. Another incorrect approach would be to prioritize meeting enrollment targets over the established admission standards. This demonstrates a failure to uphold the regulatory requirements and ethical obligations of the Institute. The focus should always be on admitting qualified candidates according to the defined criteria, rather than manipulating the process to achieve numerical goals. This can lead to a decline in academic standards and damage the Institute's reputation. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve 1. Understanding the specific regulatory framework governing admissions for the Ahrar Rasht Higher Education Institute. 2. Identifying the core principles and objectives of the admission process as outlined in these regulations. 3. Evaluating any proposed changes or pressures against these established rules and ethical guidelines. 4. Consulting with relevant internal committees or legal counsel if there is any ambiguity or potential for regulatory conflict. 5. Prioritizing transparency, fairness, and adherence to the established framework in all admission-related decisions. Question 14. When evaluating applications for the Ahrar Rasht Higher Education Institute, and a candidate submits a scanned copy of their high school diploma that appears legitimate but lacks an official seal or verifiable digital signature, what is the most appropriate course of action to ensure adherence to admission standards? Option A. Request an official transcript directly from the issuing high school or the relevant educational authority for verification, and if unavailable, seek a notarized copy of the diploma. Option B. Inform the applicant that the scanned diploma is insufficient and disqualify their application immediately without further inquiry. Option C. Accept the scanned diploma as presented, assuming its authenticity given the applicant's otherwise strong application profile. Option D. Request a sworn affidavit from the applicant stating the diploma is genuine in lieu of official verification. The correct answer is A. Request an official transcript directly from the issuing high school or the relevant educational authority for verification, and if unavailable, seek a notarized copy of the diploma. Explanation. This scenario presents a challenge in academic integrity and admissions processes, requiring careful judgment to uphold the Ahrar Rasht Higher Education Institute standards. The core difficulty lies in balancing the desire to admit promising candidates with the absolute necessity of ensuring all submitted credentials are valid and meet established criteria. Misjudging the authenticity of documents can lead to admitting unqualified students, undermining the academic reputation of the institute, and potentially violating its own admission regulations. The correct approach involves a thorough and systematic verification of all submitted documents, including academic transcripts and any other required certifications, against official records or issuing authorities. This process ensures that the institute adheres strictly to its admission policies, which mandate the authenticity of applicant qualifications. This upholds the principle of fairness to all applicants and maintains the academic rigor expected of the Ahrar Rasht Higher Education Institute. It aligns with the implicit regulatory framework governing higher education admissions, which prioritizes merit and genuine qualifications. An incorrect approach that relies solely on the applicant's self-declaration without independent verification fails to meet the institute's standards for due diligence. This bypasses essential checks and could lead to the admission of individuals who have misrepresented their academic history, thereby compromising the integrity of the admissions process and potentially violating internal policies that require verifiable credentials. Another incorrect approach, which involves accepting photocopies without requesting original documents or official verification, also falls short. While seemingly efficient, this method lacks the robustness to confirm authenticity and leaves the institute vulnerable to fraudulent submissions. This deviates from best practices in admissions, which typically require a higher level of assurance for critical documents. Finally, an approach that prioritizes meeting enrollment targets over document verification is ethically and regulatorily unsound. This demonstrates a disregard for the established admission criteria and the principles of academic integrity. Such a focus on quantity over quality can lead to significant long-term consequences for the institute's reputation and the value of its degrees. Professionals in admissions should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a clear understanding of the institute's admission policies and regulatory requirements. This framework should include a mandatory, multi-step verification process for all submitted documents. When faced with any doubt or discrepancy, the protocol should be to seek further clarification or independent verification, rather than proceeding with assumptions or expediency. The ultimate goal is to ensure that every admitted student meets the genuine academic standards set by the Ahrar Rasht Higher Education Institute. Question 15. Stakeholder feedback indicates that a promising applicant for the Ahrar Rasht Higher Education Institute's undergraduate program possesses strong extracurricular achievements and a compelling personal statement, but their academic transcripts fall slightly below the minimum stated entry requirements for their chosen field of study. The admissions committee is considering how to best address this situation while adhering to the institute's entrance exam regulations. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the regulatory framework for admissions at the Ahrar Rasht Higher Education Institute? Option A. Seek informal guidance from senior faculty members outside the official admissions committee to gauge their opinion on admitting the applicant. Option B. Conduct a thorough review of the applicant's academic transcripts and any supporting documentation against the published admission criteria, and if a deviation exists, formally propose a waiver or alternative assessment method that is permissible under the institute's regulations, with proper documentation and justification. Option C. Inform the applicant that while their profile is impressive, they do not meet the minimum academic requirements and suggest they reapply in a future cycle after improving their academic record. Option D. Grant admission based on the applicant's exceptional extracurricular achievements and personal statement, documenting these as overriding factors in a special admissions note. The correct answer is D. Grant admission based on the applicant's exceptional extracurricular achievements and personal statement, documenting these as overriding factors in a special admissions note. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between the institute's desire to attract a diverse student body and the need to adhere strictly to the admission criteria established by the Ahrar Rasht Higher Education Institute's regulatory framework. Misinterpreting or selectively applying these criteria can lead to unfair admissions, potential legal challenges, and damage to the institute's reputation. Careful judgment is required to balance inclusivity with regulatory compliance. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the applicant's documentation against the explicitly stated admission criteria, ensuring that any deviations or special considerations are documented and justified within the existing regulatory guidelines. This approach upholds the integrity of the admission process, ensures fairness to all applicants, and demonstrates adherence to the Ahrar Rasht Higher Education Institute's established rules. The regulatory justification lies in the principle of equal treatment and the mandate to follow prescribed admission procedures without arbitrary exceptions. An incorrect approach that prioritizes anecdotal evidence or personal recommendations over documented qualifications fails to comply with the objective criteria set forth by the Institute. This can lead to accusations of favoritism and a breach of procedural fairness, violating the spirit and letter of the admission regulations. Another incorrect approach that involves creating new, undocumented criteria for specific applicants undermines the established regulatory framework. This introduces subjectivity and can be seen as a circumvention of the rules, potentially leading to challenges from other applicants or regulatory bodies. Finally, an approach that delays the decision indefinitely without a clear, regulated process for addressing the applicant's situation is also professionally unsound, as it creates uncertainty and can be interpreted as an inability or unwillingness to follow established procedures. Professionals in this situation should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a clear understanding of the relevant admission regulations. They should then objectively assess the applicant's qualifications against these regulations, seeking clarification from the relevant academic or administrative departments if ambiguities arise. Any proposed exceptions or special considerations must be formally documented and justified according to established institute policies and regulatory guidelines. If a decision cannot be made within the existing framework, the matter should be escalated to the appropriate authority for a formal ruling, ensuring that all actions are transparent and defensible. Question 16. Analysis of the recruitment process for new faculty members at Ahrar Rasht Higher Education Institute reveals a situation where a department head, under pressure to fill critical teaching vacancies before the upcoming semester, is considering recommending a candidate known personally to them, despite that candidate's application materials not fully meeting all stated requirements. The department head is contemplating overlooking minor discrepancies in the candidate's published research and suggesting a less rigorous interview for this individual compared to other applicants. What is the most ethically and regulatorily sound approach for the department head to take in this scenario? Option A. Recommend the personally known candidate for immediate appointment, highlighting their potential and willingness to quickly adapt, while downplaying the minor discrepancies in their application and advocating for a streamlined onboarding process. Option B. Conduct a thorough and objective evaluation of all candidates against the established criteria, ensuring fair and consistent application of the interview process, and if the personally known candidate is the most qualified, proceed with their recommendation, otherwise recommend the best qualified candidate regardless of personal connection. Option C. Expedite the review of the personally known candidate's application and interview, while conducting a more cursory review of other applicants to ensure a timely decision that addresses the immediate staffing needs. Option D. Propose a revision of the minimum qualification requirements for the position to align with the personally known candidate's profile, justifying this change as necessary to attract suitable candidates in the current market. The correct answer is B. Conduct a thorough and objective evaluation of all candidates against the established criteria, ensuring fair and consistent application of the interview process, and if the personally known candidate is the most qualified, proceed with their recommendation, otherwise recommend the best qualified candidate regardless of personal connection. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between the Institute's immediate need for qualified faculty and the rigorous, merit-based selection process mandated by its regulatory framework. The pressure to fill positions quickly can tempt individuals to bypass established procedures, potentially compromising the quality of education and the integrity of the hiring process. Careful judgment is required to balance operational needs with adherence to established rules. The correct approach involves a thorough and objective evaluation of all candidates against predefined criteria, ensuring that the selection process is fair, transparent, and compliant with the Ahrar Rasht Higher Education Institute's internal regulations and any overarching governmental guidelines for higher education recruitment. This approach prioritizes academic merit, relevant experience, and pedagogical suitability, thereby upholding the Institute's commitment to educational excellence and its reputation. It aligns with the principle of meritocracy, which is fundamental to academic institutions. An incorrect approach that prioritizes a candidate based on personal acquaintance or perceived immediate availability, without a comprehensive assessment of their qualifications against the established criteria, fails to adhere to the principles of fair competition and objective selection. This bypasses the due diligence required by the institute's regulations and could lead to the appointment of less qualified individuals, undermining the quality of teaching and research. Ethically, it represents favoritism and a breach of professional conduct. Another incorrect approach that involves expediting the review process for a favored candidate while delaying or superficially reviewing others is a direct violation of procedural fairness. This creates an uneven playing field and is discriminatory. Such actions undermine the credibility of the hiring committee and the institute, potentially leading to legal challenges and reputational damage. It contravenes the spirit and letter of regulations designed to ensure equitable opportunity for all applicants. A further incorrect approach that involves altering the selection criteria mid-process to accommodate a particular candidate is a serious breach of integrity. This demonstrates a lack of commitment to established standards and suggests a predetermined outcome, negating the purpose of a competitive selection process. It erodes trust among applicants and stakeholders, and is a clear violation of regulatory requirements for transparent and consistent evaluation. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of the institute's recruitment policies and relevant higher education regulations. When faced with operational pressures, professionals must first reaffirm the importance of adhering to these established procedures. If there are legitimate concerns about the timeline, the appropriate course of action is to seek formal approval for any necessary procedural adjustments, clearly articulating the reasons, and ensuring that any modifications do not compromise the fairness or integrity of the selection process. Maintaining open communication with relevant oversight bodies and documenting all decisions and justifications are crucial steps in navigating such challenges ethically and professionally. Question 17. Stakeholder feedback indicates a desire to broaden the applicant pool for the upcoming Ahrar Rasht Higher Education Institute entrance exam by considering applicants with non-traditional academic backgrounds who may not perfectly fit the current standardized eligibility criteria. How should the institute's admissions committee proceed to address this feedback while strictly adhering to the Ahrar Rasht Higher Education Institute's regulatory framework for entrance examinations? Option A. Propose a formal amendment to the existing admission regulations, outlining specific, objective criteria for evaluating non-traditional backgrounds, and submit it for approval by the relevant regulatory body before implementation. Option B. Prioritize applicants with non-traditional backgrounds who are recommended by influential stakeholders, even if their qualifications do not fully meet the published eligibility requirements. Option C. Immediately implement a flexible interpretation of the current eligibility criteria to accommodate a wider range of applicants based on the stakeholder feedback, assuming the intent is to increase diversity. Option D. Create a separate, informal assessment process for applicants with non-traditional backgrounds, distinct from the main entrance exam, to gauge their suitability without altering the official regulations. The correct answer is A. Propose a formal amendment to the existing admission regulations, outlining specific, objective criteria for evaluating non-traditional backgrounds, and submit it for approval by the relevant regulatory body before implementation. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between the institute's desire to attract a diverse student body and the need to adhere strictly to the admission criteria set by the Ahrar Rasht Higher Education Institute's regulatory framework. Misinterpreting or circumventing these regulations can lead to serious consequences, including reputational damage, legal challenges, and invalidation of admissions. Careful judgment is required to balance institutional goals with regulatory compliance. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the Ahrar Rasht Higher Education Institute's official admission guidelines and consultation with the relevant admissions committee or regulatory body. This ensures that any proposed adjustments or interpretations are aligned with the established legal and regulatory framework governing admissions. The justification lies in the absolute priority of adhering to the specified regulatory framework for the exam. This approach upholds the integrity of the admission process, ensures fairness to all applicants, and maintains the institute's compliance with its governing regulations. An incorrect approach that prioritizes stakeholder satisfaction over regulatory adherence would be ethically and legally unsound. Such an approach would violate the core principles of fairness and equal opportunity mandated by the Ahrar, Rasht Higher Education Institute's admission regulations. Failing to consult the official guidelines or seeking to bypass them based on external pressure, even from influential stakeholders, constitutes a direct breach of regulatory compliance. This can lead to accusations of favoritism, discrimination, and a lack of transparency, undermining the credibility of the institute. Another incorrect approach that involves making arbitrary exceptions without a clear, documented, and regulatory-approved basis is equally problematic. Admissions decisions must be based on objective criteria defined by the institute's regulations. Introducing subjective or ad hoc criteria, even with good intentions, opens the door to bias and challenges to the fairness of the process. This deviates from the established legal and ethical standards for academic admissions. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a systematic evaluation of the feedback against the established regulatory framework. First, understand the specific concerns raised by stakeholders. Second, meticulously review the Ahrar Rasht Higher Education Institute's admission regulations and any relevant legal precedents or guidelines. Third, consult with the designated authorities within the institute responsible for admissions and regulatory compliance. Fourth, if a discrepancy or potential improvement is identified, propose solutions that are demonstrably compliant with the existing framework or, if necessary, initiate the formal process for regulatory amendment, ensuring all steps are documented and transparent. Question 18. Stakeholder feedback indicates a desire to increase the enrollment of students from underrepresented regions, leading to a discussion about potentially adjusting admission criteria for certain applicants to the Ahrar Rasht Higher Education Institute. An admissions committee member proposes that given the institute's commitment to diversity, they should consider the applicant's expressed commitment to their home region's development as a significant factor, even if their academic scores are slightly below the stated minimum for general admission. What is the most appropriate course of action for the admissions committee to take in this situation? Strictly adhering to the Ahrar Rasht Higher Education Institute's regulatory framework for entrance exams. Option A. Evaluate all applicants solely based on the published academic scores and eligibility requirements, and if specific provisions for diversity initiatives are outlined in the Ahrar Rasht Higher Education Institute's admission guidelines, explore those avenues for supporting underrepresented students without altering the core admission criteria. Option B. Postpone the admission decisions for all applicants from underrepresented regions until further internal discussions can determine if new, flexible criteria can be developed to accommodate their unique circumstances. Option C. Prioritize applicants who demonstrate a strong commitment to their home region's development, as this aligns with a broader institutional goal of societal impact, and adjust their academic score thresholds accordingly. Option D. Create a separate, informal set of admission criteria for applicants from underrepresented regions, focusing on qualitative aspects like community involvement and leadership potential to ensure their successful admission. The correct answer is A. Evaluate all applicants solely based on the published academic scores and eligibility requirements, and if specific provisions for diversity initiatives are outlined in the Ahrar Rasht Higher Education Institute's admission guidelines, explore those avenues for supporting underrepresented students without altering the core admission criteria. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between the institute's desire to attract a diverse student body and the need to adhere strictly to the admission criteria established by the Ahrar Rasht Higher Education Institute's regulatory framework. Misinterpreting or selectively applying these criteria can lead to unfair admissions, potential legal challenges, and damage to the institute's reputation. Careful judgment is required to balance inclusivity with regulatory compliance. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the applicant's documentation against the explicitly stated academic and eligibility requirements as defined by the Ahrar Rasht Higher Education Institute's admission guidelines. This ensures that all applicants are assessed on a consistent and objective basis, upholding the integrity of the admissions process and adhering to the spirit and letter of the regulations. This approach is ethically sound as it promotes fairness and equal opportunity, and it is regulatorily compliant by strictly following the established admission criteria. An incorrect approach that prioritizes anecdotal evidence or personal recommendations over documented qualifications fails to adhere to the objective criteria set forth by the institute. This can lead to the admission of unqualified candidates, undermining the academic standards, and potentially violating the institute's own admission policies. Another incorrect approach that attempts to create new, unapproved criteria for specific groups of applicants bypasses the established regulatory framework. This is a direct violation of the institute's governance and can lead to accusations of bias and discrimination, as well as regulatory sanctions. Finally, an approach that delays the decision-making process indefinitely without a clear, justifiable reason based on the regulatory framework can lead to administrative inefficiency and may also be seen as a failure to act in accordance with the institute's operational guidelines. Professionals in this situation should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a clear understanding of the Rasht Higher Education Institute's admission regulations. They should then objectively evaluate each applicant's submitted materials against these specific criteria. If ambiguities arise, the framework should include a process for seeking clarification from the relevant academic or administrative bodies within the institute, rather than making subjective interpretations. The ultimate decision must be justifiable based on the documented evidence and the institute's established rules. Question 19. Research into the faculty recruitment process at Rasht Higher Education Institute has revealed a situation where a department head is under pressure to fill a vacant teaching position quickly due to an upcoming accreditation review. A highly recommended candidate, known personally to the department head, has applied but has not yet undergone the full standard evaluation process. The department head is considering expediting the candidate's review and potentially overlooking some standard procedural steps to secure their immediate appointment. Which approach best aligns with the regulatory framework and ethical guidelines of the Rasht Higher Education Institute for faculty recruitment? Option A. Prioritize the personally recommended candidate by fast-tracking their application, conducting a brief interview, and proceeding with an offer of employment, assuming their reputation is sufficient. Option B. Create a modified set of evaluation criteria specifically tailored to the strengths of the personally recommended candidate, allowing for their swift appointment. Option C. Expedite the review process for all candidates, including the recommended one, by reducing the number of evaluation stages and reference checks to meet the urgent hiring deadline. Option D. Conduct a comprehensive and objective evaluation of the recommended candidate, alongside all other applicants, strictly adhering to the institute's established criteria and procedures for faculty selection, ensuring transparency and fairness. The correct answer is D. Conduct a comprehensive and objective evaluation of the recommended candidate, alongside all other applicants, strictly adhering to the institute's established criteria and procedures for faculty selection, ensuring transparency and fairness. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between the institute's immediate need for qualified faculty and the rigorous, merit-based selection process mandated by the Rasht Higher Education Institute's regulatory framework. The pressure to fill positions quickly can tempt individuals to bypass established procedures, potentially compromising the quality of education and the integrity of the hiring process. Careful judgment is required to balance operational needs with adherence to established academic and ethical standards. The correct approach involves a thorough and objective evaluation of all candidates against predefined criteria, ensuring transparency and fairness throughout the selection process. This aligns with the Rasht Higher Education Institute's commitment to academic excellence and its established guidelines for faculty recruitment, which emphasize meritocracy and equal opportunity. Adhering to these established procedures safeguards the institute's reputation and ensures the recruitment of individuals best suited to contribute to its academic mission. An incorrect approach that prioritizes personal recommendations over objective assessment fails to uphold the principle of meritocracy. This can lead to the selection of less qualified candidates, undermining the institute's academic standards and potentially creating an environment where favoritism, rather than competence, dictates hiring decisions. Such a practice is ethically unsound and likely violates the spirit, if not the letter, of the institute's recruitment regulations, which are designed to ensure a fair and transparent selection process. Another incorrect approach that involves expediting the review process without proper due diligence, such as skipping reference checks or failing to conduct thorough interviews, risks overlooking critical information about a candidate's suitability. This haste can result in the hiring of individuals who may not possess the necessary qualifications, experience, or ethical standing, thereby compromising the quality of instruction and potentially exposing the institute to future risks. This approach disregards the established protocols designed to ensure a comprehensive evaluation. A further incorrect approach that involves creating a new, less stringent set of criteria specifically for a favored candidate circumvents the established, transparent selection process. This is a clear violation of fairness and equity, as it disadvantages other applicants and undermines the credibility of the entire hiring procedure. Such an action would be considered unethical and a direct contravention of the institute's commitment to objective and impartial recruitment. Professionals in such situations should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes adherence to established regulations and ethical principles. This involves 1. Clearly understanding the institute's recruitment policies and procedures. 2. Objectively assessing candidates against these predefined criteria. 3. Maintaining transparency and fairness throughout the process. 4. Documenting all decisions and justifications. And 5. Seeking guidance from relevant authorities or committees if faced with conflicting pressures or ambiguities. The ultimate goal is to ensure that the selection process is both efficient and ethically sound, serving the long-term interests of the institution and its students. Question 20. Strategic planning requires the Rasht Higher Education Institute to consider adopting new educational technologies, which approach best balances innovation with the institute's mission, resource constraints, and regulatory compliance. Option A. Immediately implement the latest, most sophisticated educational technology available on the market to ensure the institute remains competitive. Option B. Conduct a thorough needs assessment, followed by a pilot testing phase for promising technologies, involving faculty and student feedback before full-scale adoption. Option C. Allow individual academic departments to independently choose and implement any educational technology they deem beneficial. Option D. Select new technologies primarily based on the lowest cost, regardless of their pedagogical suitability or long-term impact. Correct answer is B. Conduct a thorough needs assessment, followed by a pilot testing phase for promising technologies, involving faculty and student feedback before full-scale adoption. Explanation. This scenario presents a challenge in strategic planning for the Rasht Higher Education Institute, specifically concerning the integration of new educational technologies. The core difficulty lies in balancing the institute's mission and resource constraints with the rapid evolution of educational tools and the need to maintain academic integrity and student engagement. A critical aspect is ensuring that any technological adoption aligns with the institute's long-term vision and regulatory compliance, rather than being driven by transient trends. The correct approach involves a comprehensive needs assessment and pilot testing phase. This method ensures that any proposed technological solution is evaluated for its pedagogical effectiveness, technical feasibility, and alignment with the institute's strategic goals and existing infrastructure. It also allows for the identification and mitigation of potential risks, such as data privacy concerns or the digital divide among students, before full-scale implementation. This aligns with the principles of responsible innovation and resource management expected of higher education institutions, ensuring that investments are strategic and sustainable. An incorrect approach would be to immediately adopt the most advanced or popular educational technology without thorough evaluation. This could lead to significant financial waste, disruption to academic processes, and a failure to achieve the desired educational outcomes. It bypasses essential due diligence and risks implementing a solution that is not suitable for the institute's specific context or student population, potentially violating principles of effective resource allocation and academic planning. Another incorrect approach would be to prioritize cost savings above all else when selecting new technologies. While financial prudence is important, compromising on the quality or suitability of educational tools can negatively impact the student learning experience and the institute's reputation. This approach fails to consider the long-term value and pedagogical impact of technology, potentially leading to a superficial adoption that does not enhance learning. A third incorrect approach would be to delegate the entire decision-making process for technology adoption to a single department without broader consultation. This can lead to a lack of buy-in from other stakeholders, such as faculty and students, and may result in a solution that does not meet the diverse needs of the institute. It also overlooks the importance of a holistic strategic vision that integrates technology across various academic and administrative functions. Professionals tasked with strategic planning in higher education should employ a structured decision-making process that begins with clearly defining institutional goals. This is followed by thorough research and needs assessment, exploring various options, conducting pilot programs to test feasibility and effectiveness, and engaging all relevant stakeholders in the decision-making process. Risk assessment and mitigation planning are crucial throughout, ensuring that decisions are informed, ethical, and aligned with the Institute's overarching mission and regulatory obligations.